blessed Christmas to you and your family on this, our last devotion of the holiday series. Christmas, celebrated December 25th throughout much of the world for hundreds of years, both during peacetime and wartime, had its origin when the Bishop of Rome, Liberius, decreed in 354 years after Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection that all good Christians should pay honor to the birth of Christ. Like so many of our religious holidays, he was trying to give old pagan people of Rome a substitute for what they celebrated on December 25th as the Feast of Mithra. He was a pagan deity. No one knows for sure when Jesus was born, and it's for sure that he didn't want us to know, for Jesus never asked his disciples to celebrate his birth. So to be honest with you, the idea is not God's choice but man's. And unfortunately, when man gets into things, we have trouble. Much of our Christmas celebration here in America naturally comes from English descent. It seems that the English, they loved Christmas. They called it the Yule time in those early days. Later they changed it to Christ's Mass. To the English, Christmas was so special that they lived all year to prepare for Christmas. From the poorest cottage to the king's palaces, Christmas was enjoyed with much festivity. The Christmas celebration lasted 12 days. Therefore, that song, The 12 Days of Christmas. Oh, speaking about songs, to the English we owe our songs like Hark the Herald, Angel Sings, and Joy to the World. And how about this one, God Rest Thee Merry Gentlemen, and Deck the Halls. Some of what we are used to seeing at Christmas time goes back to a pagan superstition. For example, in olden times, many believed that if you hung an evergreen wreath at your door, you'd ward off evil spirits so they wouldn't come into your home. The Saxons hung holly, ivy, rosemary, and laurel, and mistletoe around the place to protect them from evil spirits. In early Roman times, enemies would become friends when they'd meet under mistletoe. Eventually, it developed into getting a kiss of friendship. Much of this was from old pagan Druid origin, as far back as 1444. Decorating streets with green boughs was a common practice in London streets. Caroling and burning the Yule log, playing games and giving gifts, eating feasts and going to church goes back hundreds of years. And now about Santa Claus. Unfortunately, he's become a part of Christmas much like, well, milk and cows. How about butter and bread, bees and honey? You can't separate them. Other countries have different forms of Santa Claus, like Italy. For example, they have a female Santa Claus called Befana. In Denmark, there's a gnome named Jule Nessen. In England, he was called Father Christmas. Of all the different forms of Santa Claus types, St. Nicholas of Northern Europe is the most commonly associated with our Christmas. He was born somewhere in Asia Minor around 300 AD, so he was a real person. Yes, there really is a Santa Claus, or they sainted him, calling him St. Nicholas. He spent his life doing good, kind deeds and giving to those in need. Once, a poor man was going to have to sell his daughters to pay off some debts. Well, unknown to the poor peasant, Nicholas paid his debts off, and the man's daughters were saved from slavery. Thus the idea came after his death on December 6th to give gifts. With the pagan holiday of Mithra, December 25th, where pagans would entreat him for a safe short winter, the Roman Church decided to celebrate the death of St. Nicholas and move it to the 25th of December, and thus was birthed St. Nicholas and the Christmas season. The Dutch brought St. Nicholas to the New World, and what the Pilgrims and Puritans tried to stop failed. Christmas, with all its pagan origin, was rooted here in America. Every single thing about Christmas has pagan origin. The tree, the decorations, the lights, the caroling, the gifts. The only Christmas thing about Christmas is Jesus and the manger, and whatever is told about his birth using the Bible during this time of year. Now, I'm sure that many of you moms and dads are listening, and you children are wondering, well, what should you do with Christmas? Should you celebrate it being so pagan in origin? I can't answer that question. Here's a story, though, that I'd like to leave you. Maybe it'll help you make some decisions. It was sent to me by a friend not long ago. The bicycle was beautiful and brand new. It was under the Christmas tree and had the names of my two sisters, my brother and myself, on it too. We saw nothing else. I was 9 years old at the time, and I couldn't believe it. The year was 1940, and for us, like so many older people, the Great Depression was still not over. So the gift was almost beyond imagination. A friend of Mom's and Dad's had given it to us, and we were thrilled. We climbed over it. We crawled under it. We danced around it. All four of us were trying to ride it through the living room at the same time. Yes, snow hadn't fallen yet that year, and all morning long we rode it up and down the streets. Literally, all four of us were riding at one time. And by afternoon, Christmas Day, we were eager for Grandpa to see it. Grandpa and Grandma were coming for Christmas dinner by bus. There'd been a time 12 years earlier when we had servants, a chauffeur, and two great houses and cars. But the Depression took it all away. Mortgages foreclosed, and finally there were 10 of us in one small house and no money. Grandpa was a very proud man. He'd been the governor of Massachusetts, president of the Constitutional Convention, and now he was penniless. He was in his late 70s, very proud, but on this day he had to borrow money for the bus fare. "They're coming! They're coming!" my two sisters shouted, seeing the two figures getting off the bus. We were about to rush out with our new bike when Brother shouted to me, "Hey, hide the bike! Quick, hide the bike!" I didn't understand, so I rushed to the window and looked out. I saw Grandpa wheeling a bicycle. It was worn and beaten, but freshly painted. Bright red, too. Grandpa was smiling. It was the biggest smile I'd seen in years. Grandpa, he walked tall as he displayed that prized winning bike. The four of us looked at each other. My brother, without saying a word, quickly carried the new bike downstairs into the cellar to hide it. We ran out to meet Grandma and Grandpa, hugging them and loving them. "Guess who this is for?" Grandpa said, his chest expanded like a proud peacock. "It's not sturdy, but—" we all piped in, "We love it, Grandpa! Thank you, we love it! Merry Christmas!" My brother shouted, rubbing his finger along the rusted chrome, "Grandpa, this is a great bike!" "It's the best Christmas present ever," Sister said, lavishing Grandma and Grandpa with hugs and kisses. We climbed aboard, all four of us again, and we tried to ride the old rickety thing. The tire went flat. We pumped it up, though. Later, we found out that Grandpa had gone to Salvation Army. He'd paid a few pennies for the old bike, and he'd taken it home and fixed it up the best he could, painted it with that bright red paint. We rode that old rickety thing the whole time. Grandpa and Grandma were there, and Grandpa, he never left the front porch that afternoon. He stood there tirelessly, watching us race back and forth on the old wobbly bike. And I know now that it was the best gift that we could have ever given to Grandpa. For he never looked taller or prouder than when he bent down to get the hanky from Grandma's apron pocket and to quietly wipe the tears from his eyes. Merry Christmas.